Hi, my name's Amy. I work at St Luke's Preschool as the Inclusion Support Facilitator, and I am here with Jane. Jane, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name's Jane Warren, and I actually wear a couple of hats that is the reason that Amy's invited me here today. So I work at the University of Wollongong and teach in the Bachelor of Education, the early years, which is a specialised degree for teaching people who are going to be educators for people in the birth to 5 age range, so for the prior to school. So they're going to be teaching in that prior to school context. The other thing that I'm an early childhood teacher myself, so I think that's important because I guess that hat always stays on, whatever else you do. So come very much from the perspective of an early childhood teacher, and so I've got quite a bit of experience in early childhood, and I also do supported playgroups for children who have disabilities. So I think that's an important thing as well. So I've got experience with working with children with a whole lot of disabilities. So when Amy and I were first talking about this, we decided that we thought, you know, between the two of us, hopefully there'll be some snippets of information that might be useful for some of the parents out there.
Here's hoping. So we're going to look at today specifically transition to school and some probably more practical strategies for parents to look at and to do before their child actually commences school.
Yes.
So I guess one of the big questions that come up, and I've heard this in different scenarios, is what are the things that parents should actually share with schools? What information is relevant for schools? So what do you think, Jane, to that question?
Well, I think the first thing to remember is that whether or not a child has a disability, all of the other information that's available around transition to school, all of the stuff that you've got here around school readiness, parents need to look at what's useful for them,
yes,
irrespective of whether their child has a disability or not. So a lot of the things that are important for every child are definitely important for parents of children with disabilities to look at first.
Yes.
I guess one thing that's important around that, though, is not to be afraid to go, well, that won't quite work for my child, so what do I need to think of? So parents recognising they're the experts on their own child.
Yeah.
So think about your own child, and then what kind of things do people, what do I want to know around getting my child ready for school?
Yeah.
And then think about your own child within that. So around the idea of what kinds of things, do you need to share with schools? Where do you start in this process? So I guess, if you've listened to some of the other information in these talks where maybe parents have shared their experiences around school, or you've listened to some of the people talking about from school contexts, I think all of that's interesting to have in the back of your mind. And hopefully then when you've made a decision around the kind of school that you might want to go to, definitely going to visit those schools. And, we can get into that a little bit more later about some of that process. But I think writing down everything you think you want to tell the school about your child.
Yeah.
So even if you think, is that something that they would want to know, just write it down. Share that with the school. If you think it's important enough to share with the school, it probably is.
Yes.
So anything that you have. So obviously, if there's children who have particular medical needs, that's really important because your child's safety is paramount and their health and well-being. So making sure that any information around your child's medical needs, particular characteristics of your child, because sometimes people that may have less knowledge in a particular area might have heard of a particular disability, but they don't know what it looks like for your child.
Yeah.
So, they can read, for example, what autism is, but they don't know what autism is for someone's individual child.
Yeah.
So anything you can share with the school that helps them to get a good picture of your child, because then it's helping to have the best fit for the child.
Yes. We as a preschool have looked into a concept all about me forms for schools, and that's not limited to teachers though. That's a great resource for families to have. So we'll upload one of those onto our website that you can have a look at. But we look at your child's name, obviously a photo, because I think names are hard and they don't actually connect to them until they've met them. So having a photo of your child on there is helpful too for the child's teacher. What things they like or things that you admire about your child, but what is important for them to know is helpful. So that list that you were talking about would be great to put on that that form. And how to best support me. Every child learns differently. Every child is unique and individual, and we value that as a preschool, but that doesn't change when you go into the kindergarten setting. So putting the ways that your child learns best and the things that motivate them and the things that you know that is important for teachers to know is helpful on a little form. So we can put that up too. I think that would be helpful for parents.
I think that would be really good. And you know, accessing any kind of templates that might have things like just looking around at what's there and what kind of information would you really want people to know. And I think one of the hard things for parents of children with disabilities is you know, you want to absolutely show the school what your child's strengths are, absolutely, without a doubt. But it's also important to mention some of the things that they will need support with. Yeah. And I think, you know, we really want to focus on children's strengths and what they can do rather than what they can't do. But we also want the school to understand a realistic picture of the child. Yeah. Because if you are trying to maybe just focus on the strengths, then the school doesn't necessarily know what they need to do to prepare to make it the best transition for their child. Yeah. So focusing on all the things your child does well, but also identifying where your child might need support from your perspective. Yeah. And hopefully then the school will also work out what that looks like. Yes. But in the beginning, definitely sharing and also sharing the concerns you have. Yes. Because as a parent, I think parents, there'll be things that they might not seem like big things to someone else, but they're really important things for you as a parent. And I think sharing those with the school is really important as well. And
I guess if you share it and it's, you know, you've given that information, but then if it's not really relevant in that context, then, you know, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's more about them having some knowledge before your child gets there of what you may be concerned about. Yes. Yeah, and every child is so individual. So is it okay for you to do that, to ring the school and chat to them?
Or? I think as much communication as you can have with the school is going to be really important. And I know in the session where the parents shared their experiences, all three of them reinforced the importance of open communication with the school. Yeah. And sometimes it is hard because parents have to put themselves out a little bit. Yeah. They have to put themselves out there. Maybe they feel a little bit vulnerable in that. But it's really important for parents to really make sure they communicate with the school. And don't feel like they can't, that they're going to be pesky parents or that they're going to be labelled as...
that parent, I hear. I'm that parent, yes.
But I think parents have to remember that the children belong to you.
Yes.
They're part of your family and you need to make the decisions that are the right ones for you. And so contacting the school, and if you're not happy with something that the school is offering or suggesting, it's okay to come back and say, well, we appreciate this. However, we also think we need to look at this. So, for example, if the school was offering a transition program that the children were going, once a week on Friday mornings, and you felt like that once a week wasn't really sufficient enough for your child to be able to get used to that environment, then I would say, well, the once a week is great, but also my child might need. Yes. So how else can we do that? So what's the way that would work for your school, but this is to meet the needs of my child?
Yes. And I've talked to a few teachers and things as well, and often as a preschool we ask what you would like, but going to a school you actually almost have to ask them. A lot of them are willing to do it and do what is best for your child, but again, you have to be the one that advocates and asks those questions. So it's really important for families to do that.
And sometimes, if there are families where they feel that that's a little bit difficult to do on their own, talking to their early childhood centre and getting that support from the centre is really good as well. Yeah. And even if the parents are going, I don't really know what would the school want to know about my child, talk to your early childhood centre.
Definitely.
Because if you think about the children in your centre, if parents said to you, well, what do you think? Because you can think about, the parents maybe at home are used to their child being, interacting with one or two children. You get to see them interacting with a whole lot of children. So there might be things that you can see that might be things the school needs to know. So I think that sort of thing's important as well.
Yeah, definitely. So when should a parent get in contact with the school?
probably yesterday.
2 years ago.
Really, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
I think if, having said that, if your child's going to school next year and you are now sitting here listening to this going, I haven't done anything yet, don't
That's
panic,
okay.
just start now.
Yeah.
But if your child's younger, start now, just even if it's just looking around at different options, even if it's just making contact. So I know within all of the information that's available online, there's information from someone from the Department of Education or someone from Catholic Education to find out, well, what do they suggest? What's the timeline they suggest? But yeah, I mean, it's never too late.
No.
It's just, I guess the sooner the process starts, the less stressful it is for the parents, because they feel like they've got more preparation, not just for their child, but for them as well, because it's not an easy thing. Transition to school's hard for everybody, let alone when there's more complexities around a particular child or family. And so I think the sooner that you can start, the better, but don't panic if you haven't started, just get the ball rolling when you can.
Yeah, definitely. I guess to parents that aren't sure of which school is best, is ringing the school and talking to a range of schools. That would be a better process to start earlier rather than later. Yeah.
And I think one of the things around schools is not just about ringing the school, but finding out if you can go and visit the school. And because most of us, when we go places, we feel more comfortable in some places than others. And I think parents need to recognise those feelings in themselves and realise they're really valuable feelings. And if they don't feel comfortable, either trying to work out why they don't or just going, this isn't the right fit for us. And it doesn't matter if your best friend went to that school and it's the right fit for them, it might not be the right fit for you. So if you can go and visit, I think that's a really valuable thing as well.
Yeah. So what things, I guess, parents can ask? We've touched on a few of these, but what are some things that parents, can ask that maybe we don't know that we can ask when they're going to school? What things can we request? What things would be helpful that the school can provide for us as we think about transition?
Well, I think sometimes to start with, you might want to look at some of those bigger things, like whether there's funding available for your child. So if your child's going to be in a mainstream environment, are they eligible for funding? What does that look like for my child within that environment during the day? So some of the bigger things, even finding out, so if the child has a physical disability, which classroom would be the child's classroom, identifying what the physical restrictions might be, whether it's getting to the canteen or whatever it is. Of course there'd be wheelchair accessible toilets or things like that, but just making sure. So I think sometimes starting with some of those bigger things, because they might be things that take longer to get in place. So the school might have to apply for particular funding, or if they do need any kind of capital works to happen. So those are big things, but then I think just parents sitting back and thinking about your child and what do you want to know. So it might seem like a silly question for a different parent, but it's the right question for you to ask. So finding out, you might be really interested, for example, in knowing not only how many children are going to be in the class, but what's the seating arrangement for the children in a classroom. Or if you know that your child in the playground would get a little bit lost, what kind of support would your child be able to get in the playground? Because the playground might be more open and maybe a little bit more overwhelming for a particular child. Or if something like assembly, all being in a hall together, would be too overwhelming, what are the considerations that the school would put into place? So finding out those things, I think all of those are important, but even like practical little tiny things that you might think, I can't ask the school that. I would suggest anything you want to know, you ask the school.
So photos of the school, of classrooms and things like that. If you haven't had the opportunity to visit beforehand, do you think that is something that is reasonable to ask?
I think it's really valuable to do that sort of thing. So different children, you might be listening to this with a child with a disability where a transition isn't, for the child's not going to be an issue, it's more for you. So some of these things might not be relevant to you, but if, for example, your child does have difficulty with transitions, finding out if you can take photos of different things in the school, or if the school can provide those photos if they don't want, some random person taking photos within the school. they may say, look, we can give you pictures. What do you want pictures of? Or they may say you can come at this time and take pictures. So it might be things like key people within the school you might want to take pictures of. So maybe the principal, the person in the library.
Canteen lady.
Yes, canteen lady, someone in the office.
Yeah.
If you can find out who your child's teacher is going to be, or even who the kindergarten teacher is going to be, then having photos of the kindergarten teachers. Just anyone within the school that might be relevant for your child, but even things like taking a photo of the toilet block, or even of the actual toilet with the door, because some children might never have been to the toilet in a toilet with the door except with mum or dad at a shopping centre. So mum or dad's always done the door. And so the child's never actually had to navigate that sort of thing on their own. So sometimes it can be taking photos of things like that, as well as taking photos of, maybe the school bus. If that's something down the track, you want your child to go on the bus. If it's a green bus, then you need to take a picture of the green bus, not the white bus.
Or the blue one.
Or it might be something like they probably know where the kindergarten classrooms are because they probably had the same kindergarten classrooms for years. So even taking photos of things in the kindergarten classroom, the outside of the school. So preparing yourself as well as your child, but then looking at what are some of the things you can do with those photos. So, there's a whole lot of things. I know that we've talked about some things here in terms of preparing your child. So maybe creating a social story that actually uses pictures of things that are relevant to the school. So I know you were saying before that there's like things like this that are general kind of social stories, and we can put some templates of that sort of thing up. But then, putting photos of your own child in there, and then using that story as, not just a week before you go to school, but start reading it at night time. Or even if your child likes to listen to stories but not necessarily read stories, start making up stories about school, as your bedtime stories. Just talk about, when I go to school, or, when so-and-so went to school. Or so start embedding some of that in so it becomes just part of what you're doing. So I think things like that are really valuable as well. But finding out from the school, they might even have some templates of things that they
may even have a social story of their school.
That's right. Or they might even have things where they say, well, so for example, in the session where the parents talked, one of the parents spoke about her kind of preparing the school because her child had high support needs, and what did the school want from her to be able to help that transition. So I think anything like that you can gather beforehand is going to be helpful. But as well as just taking the photos of the school, you might even find that, you even if you don't go into the school, you might find that you want to drive past the school once a week or twice a week, so that you actually drive that route to school, and then you might even just stop outside and go, there's school. So you're just getting your child used to those things without it being a sudden big step. So it's not just about going to the orientation that the school has. Think about how you want to orient your child to the school. Because the parents are the ones who know how's their child going to cope with this, and what are the things that are going to be those challenges. So I know you and I talked about some other kind of really practical ways of helping your child, to get ready for school as well, and some of the other things that they might need.
That's true. I loved that. I've had a child go to school and we walked around the school as part of our exercise and we talked about it for months beforehand, and that really helped. That's my school, and that ownership towards I'm going there, and he could tell other people that's my school.
And I think one of the other things is that for parents, often we're anxious about that process as well.
It's true, very true.
We're nervous about the children going to school. And so I think as parents as well, being enthusiastic about school. So even if you're feeling a little bit nervous, trying not to be too nervous with your child.
Don't show them, that's
so,
it.
when you go to drive at the school, even if you think, I could burst into tears now at the thought of my child being in big school, try to reserve that for a little bit different time. And when you're visiting the school, try to be really positive about there's the school, and so that it adds a pleasurable element to the child.
Because children pick up on what we're feeling as well.
And if you're anxious about it, then the child will be anxious about it as well.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, you know, while of course, you know, if there's a situation where that doesn't happen, then that's okay. But just keeping in mind that if you're enthusiastic, then that is going to be going off on your child as well.
Yes,
so
definitely.
those walks around the school, or the visits, or the drive-bys, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or even if there is a bus in your street that picks up other children from the school, even going out in the mornings when the children are getting on the bus.
Yes.
So they're just seeing that. You don't even have to always have that conversation,
No.
but they're just seeing that and it becomes part of their everyday.
Yeah, they're great. We have a few other practical strategies, don't we, Jane?
Yes.
We might do this one now.
Yep, that's
so
great.
Just before school starts or getting ready just for school, there's a few things that children really need to be a bit more independent in. Isn't that right? So I had my first child went a few years ago to school, and I got the amazing bag of interest, and I was so excited, and we did practice the zippers because that's really important. But halfway through the term, I got a conversation with his teacher, and she's saying, is there any chance we could get a different bag for him? He can't put in all his things in the time period between when we're lining up to get down to the cola, and he gets a bit flustered. So we ended up getting not a zipper bag, a pull-out, so he could just stuff all his things in. So that was when I went, oh yeah, bags are important. So get your children to practice using them, and in a rushed way. And you know, we as parents can be quite organised, and we put in the lunchbox in a certain way, in a position, and it can be quite frustrating for children to try and do all of that in a hurry.
And you know, and it's not likely that the child everything's going to go back in the lunchbox,
No,
and it's not very likely the jumper's going to be folded, or you know, the library bag is going to be neatly in the corner. So you know, sort of shoving everything in and seeing if it does fit.
Yeah, exactly.
Is really good.
Yeah.
But I think with thinking about the bags and things that are, I guess, are optional. So, you know, say with your school shoes that if you have to wear black shoes, that's fine. But do the shoes have to have laces, or can they be Velcro shoes? Because if your child struggles with laces, don't give them something else to be anxious about.
No.
Put the Velcro shoes on, or, you know, make sure when you get the socks, don't get the socks too tight if your child doesn't like socks that are too tight. Because they're the things that you have some control over.
Yes.
So around the actual school uniform, I think there's some practical things to think about in relation to the school uniform even. So most children will enjoy putting the school uniform on to try it on. But if your child, for example, has sensory kind of challenges, whether it's around, you know, the feeling of things, trying on a jacket might be a jacket that they've never kind of worn a jacket like that. So it might have a different feeling to it. So even if you can try that on and wear it regularly. So you know what, if they end up going to school with a jacket that's slightly more worn because you've been wearing it for 6 months, that's much better for your child than having a pristine jacket that it stresses them out.
Or they don't put on when it's cold.
Yes,
because they don't like it.
No.
Yeah.
And even if it's, you know, I mean, there's a tiny little label in here which might not be anything, but for your child it might be a big thing. So
cut
that label out if they don't like it. Or, you know, if this drawstring bothers them, well, does it really have to be there? It's still the school jacket. So, you know, thinking about things like that can be really important. But also, it's okay if your child wears the school uniform you know, for 6 months before they go to school.
Yep.
If they like putting the school shirt on, let them wear it.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if they go to Woolies with the school shirt on when they're 3.
No.
You know, it's really no problem, but it's better to do that than them be anxious about it. And, you know, if your child likes things that are softer, wash it 25 times before they start, or soften it, or, you know, whatever it is. And say that pair of shorts that you've got there that has pockets in it.
Yes.
If they're not used to wearing shorts that have got lots of pockets, they might actually be quite anxious about that. Or say it's a school dress that has a zip on the pocket, and you might think, I'll put the hanky or the tissue in the pocket, but they can't open the zip when it's on the side. So little practical things, it might be about changing the zip to a Velcro in the pocket to make it easier. So they can be things that just seem like they're so little, but they're actually huge.
And I guess for teachers, they're asking children to come prepared and a bit more independent, so they don't have to do that for 25 children. So that's helpful for them. They may not have the teacher there to help them.
Saying that, if your child does struggle with something, make sure the teacher knows that.
Definitely.
So if your child really can't do buttons, I mean, obviously avoid them where you can, but where you can't, make sure the teacher knows that your child has difficulty with buttons.
Yes.
because then that's just part of something that they can do. But I think there's other independent things. So in relation to the lunchbox too.
Yeah, so I've got one of those.
So, with a child's lunchbox, and for people whose children are very particular about the kind of items that they like, obviously get the drink bottle your child likes.
Yes.
Get the lunchbox, the colour that your child likes,
Yeah.
because you've got options with these. If you're in a school, you don't have the option of the colour of the shirt they're wearing, but
Definitely.
you can pick your own lunchbox.
And I think I've come in contact with a lot of children who feel like there are a lot of rules made for children and they feel like they don't have a lot of control or choices. So particularly school where there is a lot of conformity, to give them those choices outside of
Absolutely.
school.
And I think, even this kind of, a lot of parents whose children do have difficulty with choices are probably used to this kind of thing. But even a choice board, or even just using this as a reminder to yourself, give your children choices where they can have choices.
Definitely.
Because there's so much about school where you don't have a choice. So you have to wear the school uniform, you have to line up here, you have to do this, you have to do that.
Yeah.
It might be the underwear that you can wear that
Yes.
you can choose, or it might be something else that you can choose.
The apple or the mandarin for a crunch and sip.
And so, as I said, you don't necessarily need to use a visual thing, but it's just a good reminder to give your children choices around school, because that empowers children as well, and it gives them that sense of ownership about their experience, and that's important. But with the lunchbox and the drink bottle, it's about choosing the things that they like to start with and they're comfortable with, but then it's also the practical elements. So I know we were talking before, Amy, about, say, for example, with a drink bottle that I can't even open the lid, but
we need to practice that, Jane.
But if a child has a drink and they might be able to unscrew the lid, but if they don't get the thread right and they just do it a little bit and then they put it in their bag upside down, then that's quite distressing for everything, for the parent as well as the child, but it's quite distressing for everything to get wet. So maybe that's not the right kind of drink bottle for your child to have, or the particular lunchbox that's hard to open. But it's also about those other practical things in the lunchbox. So if your child, for example, is used to having cut up apple and then you put a whole apple in, that can actually be quite distressing for a child, or something that they're used to having at home but you don't even realise that you always open it for them.
Yes.
Or,
Cling wrap is one of those.
Yes.
I find for preschoolers even find that tricky. And
some schools will have, nude lunch boxes where, they don't encourage wrapping and things like that. So you need to find out those things. But something like Glad Wrap sometimes really hard to find the end of. So how to open that, and so then the child ends up chewing through the Glad Wrap to try and get their lunch. So just trying to. And experimenting with a few things like this beforehand. So give your child some things at home and watch what they do with them and whether they can use it, so that you're practicing that months before, so that then they know they can open it, or you realise that you have always chopped up the apple. So now you're going to just cut it in half and leave it, and then you're going to go to a whole apple or whatever it is. Yeah. But if they don't like whole apples, don't give them a whole apple.
Yeah.
It might be giving them a mandarin where you've already started the opening of it, or it's a mandarin that you have peeled and then you've put in a container.
Yeah.
And I know you've got a container there too, Amy, and some of these containers are really hard to open, but equally hard to close.
Put on, yeah.
And so, don't put yogurt in a container that
unless you want it through the bag.
child might have difficulty closing, because it's just going to be a bit of a nightmare for you and the child. And, that can be distressing as well for a child.
Yeah.
So I think, just the lunchbox, opening the lunchbox, and these are the things that sometimes you don't know what your child can and can't do until you actually really stop and think about it and go, right, I'm going to put their lunch in a lunchbox. So it might be months before they start school that you actually start putting their lunch in the lunchbox.
Yeah.
And see what they can do with it.
Yeah.
And realise that they can't open that particular lunchbox. So maybe if they're good with zips, instead of this kind of lunchbox, you get one of the ones that's got a zip.
Yeah.
So it's really easy for them to open. Or they might be able to open one container more easily. So you mentioned with your son it's the time factor.
Yes.
They might be able to open and close containers, but they can't open and close that many containers in that time.
And they want to go and play. That's the big thing I'm finding, that there's a quick amount of time to eat their food and then go and play. They don't want to take a container out to the playground or anything.
So it might be about getting a container that's got some compartments in it, so it's only opening one container rather than opening 3 different containers.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of things that we can't make those decisions for parents as to what's right for their child. So just parents thinking about, well, what can my child do independently? And if they can't open their lunchbox and you can't find a lunchbox that they can open on their own, make sure the school knows that.
Yes.
So the child's not distressed.
And not eating there all day. Yes.
Or not having a drink all day because they can't work out how to do that.
Yeah.
So they don't have to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
It's about learning those things.
And sharing the information with the teachers.
And not being scared to tell the teachers something that they can't do and that they need help with.
Yeah. The other thing in the flip side of that, Jane, is because they only have such a short period of time, for those children that find choices quite hard, don't put too many choices in the lunchbox. Put the favourite items, but maybe there's one of that item that the child chooses with you in the morning, so that when it comes to actually making that choice in that time pressure situation, they're not feeling overwhelmed.
Yes, and I think that's important. Sometimes it's that, as parents we want to make sure our child's got, that they're really, really happy at school.
All the food groups are covered.
So, you want to be that parent who does all the right things as well. And so, also, don't put things in that your child doesn't like because you think that you should, because the school told you that your child needs to have a healthy something.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need to follow the rules of the school.
Yes, definitely.
But don't, if they don't like alfalfa on their sandwich, don't give them an alfalfa sandwich because they're never going to eat it. It's only going to be distressing for them. So pick something else that's healthy that they do like.
Yeah.
Your point about choices though is really important. That we can give children too many choices and it can be overwhelming. And I don't know if you've ever, even as an adult.
Subway, Jane. I find Subway hard. There's so many choices to choose.
Even in the supermarket, you stand there and you look at the bread and you go, there's 63 different breads to choose from.
Yeah.
Like, it's too hard.
Yeah.
So for someone who choices is difficult for, if they've got too many things there to choose from, it will be a bit distressing. So it's not what parents are hoping.
No.
So, they can have some other choices at home and just give them, and it might be about, it's okay to have the same thing every day if that's what brings your child security.
Yes.
It's okay to have exactly the same lunch.
Yeah.
And, it's important for children to find that thing that's your child's thing.
Yes, definitely. And you want them to be excited about their lunch too.
Absolutely. It's a big part of school.
That's exactly it. So we've talked about backpacks, we've talked about lunchbox, uniforms, shoes. Toileting is a big one because that's a new environment, a new toilet. Often we've commented before that there's a lock, and often that's done with mum and dad outside of the home. I mean, I don't have a lock like that on my bathroom at home, and I know at preschool we certainly don't have them. So practicing that skill of opening and unlocking the door for them before they get to that environment.
Yes.
Otherwise, and shutting the door. For some children, actually shutting a door to go to the toilet is not something that they've done before.
No. And I think, parents can think about whether, as a parent myself, not of young children, but I know I would not have been happy letting my child go into public toilets on their own to practice with the locks on their own.
Yeah.
But if you go into a toilet with your child, then getting them to do the lock.
Yes.
So even if you go in with your child, then saying, okay, unlock the door now, or, can you lock the door, so that they're practicing those things.
Yes.
But when you go to visit the school, make sure you take your child to the toilet.
Yes.
So when you go to the orientation at the school, make sure you go to the toilets.
Yeah.
So even if your child doesn't need to go to the toilet, you might say, well, we're going to just go to the toilets and have a look at the toilets.
Yeah.
And it might be the tap might be totally different to your tap at home.
Yeah.
Or the soap isn't, it's a different dispenser, or whatever it is. Just thinking about some of those practical things that might be more overwhelming. But I think if your child is toilet trained, then it's even the fact that at home they probably don't ask when they want to go to the toilet. They go to the toilet. Whereas and even at preschool, they don't necessarily ask if they can go to the toilet.
True. Yeah.
So recognising that if they're in the classroom, that they have to remember if they need to go to the toilet, they just need to tell somebody, because depending on the particular teacher, that might be something that is a requirement.
Yes.
That they can't just walk out of the classroom.
No. Hand up or,
Yes, so whatever it is, but just reminding your child it's okay.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, if your child is not verbal, then you would have worked out with the school, what
Yes.
things are in place around that. Or if your child's not toilet trained, then obviously the school needs to know that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
you know, depending on your child's support needs, all of that information needs to be communicated really well with the school so
Yes.
that then they're in the best place to support your child.
Yeah, definitely. Now, 6 weeks is a big, long length of time. I know from finishing preschool and starting kindergarten. What is some support that a family could provide for the child for them to be best prepared for school?
Well, I think one of the parents, when we had the parents session before, one of the parents was saying that they actually needed to stop talking about school because for her child it was actually increasing his anxiety.
Yeah.
So again, I think parents recognising what's the right thing for their child.
Yes.
So if you find that every relative and every neighbour and everybody is saying, are you going to school? You're going to school soon? And your child's distressed by that,
Yeah.
maybe reminding people not to ask every single time they see your child.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, if your child's excited about it, maximise that.
Yes.
So go with the excitement and say, you know, like I said, do they want to wear their school hat today? Do they want to wear their school uniform today?
Yeah.
If your child's anxious, looking at how you can still best prepare them, but you know what's the right thing for your child. So like I said, it might be about you putting the school hat on when you go outside to
Yeah.
peg washing on the line, that you wear the school hat.
Yeah.
Your child doesn't want to wear it, but they're still seeing it. So it's
Yes.
still part of that preparation. But I think, yeah, when you can, talking about school, and like I said, you know, telling stories at night that are about school, or getting them excited about something, or when you might be going to preschool, but you say, do you want to drive past the school, you know, on the way home? But that period of time between, maybe for children who are in centres where it does finish before
Yes.
Christmas, and
Yeah.
then they're not going for a number of weeks, then driving past the school is really important. Looking at things, getting them, you know, can they choose the bag?
Yes.
So some schools might have backpacks that are part of the school uniform.
Yeah.
But, you know, can they be part of the choice around their backpack?
Yeah.
Part of the choice around their lunchbox? And try to get those things, the more you can get them involved in the process,
Yeah. More
is
excited they get.
going to help them. And just preparing them in the way that maybe it is once a week that you put lunch in a lunchbox at home, even over summer.
Yeah.
Or you go on a picnic so that you are having your lunch in a lunchbox.
Yes.
So that the child's having to open it and you know, and take the backpack or a backpack, and so that you can see, do things go back in upside down, and if they did that drink bottle leak or did it not?
Yes.
So that you're practicing that too,
Yeah.
to see. But I think that, you know, that whole process of transition, it's important for families as well as children, because it's hard for families.
Yeah.
Knowing your children's going to school, particularly if it is your first or only child,
Yeah.
that's a really scary thing.
Yeah.
And recognising that it's okay to feel a bit anxious as a parent, but how can you best support your child?
Yeah.
And even in the preparation of thinking about, you know, the first day of school, for parents, like, what are you going to do?
Yes.
What are you going to do? Because you can't loiter outside the gate all day and watch them through the fence.
Keep yourself busy for some people, isn't it?
Yes, it
It's
might
making sure I
be-
have a list of to-dos, so I'm
Yes,
distracted a
or
little
it
bit.
might be about going out for coffee, so that you might not have been able to do that very easily before. So
Yeah.
I think for parents, it's recognising that it's okay that it's a big thing for you as well.
Yeah.
You won't be the only parent, you know, who's crying in their car after they've dropped their child.
Yeah.
But also, you might not be the only parent who's also celebrating and having a wonderful day and not remotely being bothered. So,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
some parents they'll be really upset by it. Some parents will be celebrating it, and either is fine.
Yes.
And everyone's different, and that's okay.
Yeah. We've talked about walking past schools, but I know a lot of schools these days, they're actually locally as well, have the option to go in and go to a playground within the school if that's what your school has. But even if it's not your school, going to another school that has a playground to look through what it is in that environment that's there. You can talk about differences, but yeah, just experiencing that environment of being in a
And
school.
I think knowing your child, whether going to a different school will confuse them or whether it won't, you can just, because, you know, you don't want them to visit a school and then that's actually given them now they're going, where's those monkey bars? Because I want those at my
Yeah,
school.
that's right.
But knowing what's, you know, a lot of schools do have fences now and are much more secure, but finding out, is there a time and in the afternoon, even after children leave, before the gates are locked,
Yes.
that you'd be able to do a walk through the school.
Yeah.
So finding out that sort of information from the school is really important.
Yeah. The other thing is that routines often change for all families when school commences. So starting to change some of those routines in the holidays that, bedtime is a big one of them as well, for making sure 5 days a week is hard to sustain, and we know that sleep's important. So setting those positive routines for bedtimes, for getting ready independently, for whatever it looks like for your family. But that's a really valuable thing to do as well.
Yes. And even, if you're not normally in a rush at breakfast time, that probably is going to change when you start school. So even having kind of just gradually reducing the time it takes to have breakfast, or getting up and all getting dressed. So you just get dressed and we're ready to go. So be ready to go at 8:30 or whatever the time is going to be for school, rather than that suddenly being 2 days before school going, oh, whoops, we've forgotten about this. And it's just independent things with your children. So making sure, if they are toilet trained, but toileting is more difficult for them, getting them to really practice the skills of cleaning themselves up after going to the toilet. So that, because they're the kind of things that can create social difficulties or embarrassment for children. So if they don't wipe their bottom well, for example, practicing that really well. But if it's not within your child's capacity to do that, that's okay, as long as the school knows it's not. So the school knows your child needs assistance with that. So they're the kinds of things, very practical things. And I guess asking, if you're not sure, ask your preschool, ask your early childhood centre, what sort of things do you think I need to work on? What kinds of things would be beneficial for us to look at between now and then? Because sometimes your child has had different experiences in a different environment, that you can maximise the learning from that for both of you.
I know that a lot of schools do also send out kind of checklists or countdown calendars and say, try this, try this. So doing something like that is a valuable thing to do, because they're often based on skills that they will be required to have for school.
And I mean, you can even create that with your own child if your school doesn't do it. Thinking about, well, what are we going to do? Maybe it is about that we're going to pack up our lunchbox every day after lunch, and that. So it's a goal that you and your child have together, and then there's some kind of reward that you go to the park on Friday because you've done that, or whatever it is that you're looking at, how to give children some empowerment, I guess, in the whole process is really important. And depending on the child's support needs, that all of the factors that contribute to positive transition still apply, but you do need to look at what's your child's individual needs. What are the things that are going to be a challenge for them? What is going to be a challenge for you as a parent? And how can you best manage those things so they don't all come at once?
Gradual transitions. So we've mentioned a lot of things, Jane. Is there anything that you feel that we haven't covered that would be valuable for families to know?
No, I think families recognising that they are the experts of their own child, but that they can learn from people who have experience. So whether it's previous parents who have sent their children to school, or their early childhood centre. So taking all the information people want to offer, and even so this kind of forum that the parents have been able to access, you might listen to something where you go, that's great. You might listen to something else where you think, that's not for me, that's not my child. Well, you don't have to take that on board. So, really thinking about your own child and how can you make the transition as positive as you can for you and your child. That's really important. The other thing I was also going to say was that, when we put these templates and things up on the site, we can also just put my email address up there. And if parents do have any questions that they would like to ask. I'm certainly not an expert on everything around transition to school, but there might be something that I can either direct you to someone else, or that I can provide some kind of more specific answer to someone based on their own child's needs.
And I love that, because every child is individual, so we've covered a lot of bases, but there are, I'm sure, further questions parents have.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for your time, Jane. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
No worries.